Crossing the biological threshold of 50 years of age represents a fundamental shift in human physiology, a period where the body transitions from a state of effortless resilience and rapid cellular turnover to a state that requires deliberate, precise, and uncompromising biological stewardship. Habits that were once easily absorbed and mitigated by the robust metabolism and elastic tissues of a 30-year-old now act as cumulative micro-traumas, silently eroding the foundation of your health. The most critical window of vulnerability in this aging process occurs during the first 60 minutes after awakening. This specific hour dictates the entire biochemical, endocrine, and neurological trajectory of your day. If you are executing the standard modern morning routine, you are likely engaging in 5 specific habits that aggressively sabotage your circadian rhythm, hijack your metabolic flexibility, and inflict severe mechanical stress on your skeletal structure. To preserve your functional longevity, prevent chronic disease, and maintain a high quality of life into your later decades, you must immediately cease these destructive morning practices and understand the deep medical reality of how they are actively accelerating the aging process within your cells. The first and perhaps most pervasive physiological assault begins the exact second your eyes open, driven by the immediate reflexive reaching for a smartphone. Checking emails, news, or messages immediately upon waking is medically disastrous for an individual over 50. To understand why, one must examine the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Upon waking, your body initiates a process called the cortisol awakening response. This is a healthy, evolutionary spike in cortisol designed to pull you out of the sleep cycle and elevate your blood pressure slightly. It provides the systemic alertness required to start the day. However, in your 50s, your adrenal glands have endured decades of stress. When you flood your brain with stressful digital information, you artificially hijack this natural cortisol awakening response. You force the adrenal glands to dump an excessive, unnatural volume of cortisol and adrenaline into the bloodstream. This throws the autonomic nervous system instantly into a state of sympathetic overdrive, a fight-or-flight response. Instead of waking up calmly, your cardiovascular system is placed under immense stress, causing microvascular constriction. Over time, this surge leads to severe adrenal fatigue and chronic morning anxiety. It also causes the rapid accumulation of visceral adipose tissue around your abdominal organs. Elevated cortisol chemically instructs the body to store fat for perceived impending trauma. This endocrine disruption is severely compounded by the second habit, the zero-light morning. Countless individuals over 50 wake up, remain in dimly lit rooms, navigate their homes under artificial yellow lighting, and fail to expose their eyes to natural, unfiltered sunlight within the first hour of waking. This practice completely dismantles the body's internal biological clock, located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the brain. The human circadian rhythm is not governed by a watch. It is dictated by the precise interaction between photons of natural light and the melanopsin receptors located in the retina of your eyes. When you step outside into the morning light, these receptors send a powerful electrical signal directly to the brain, commanding the pineal gland to instantly halt the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone. This light exposure sets a biological timer. Exactly 12 to 14 hours later, the brain will know to begin producing melatonin again. When you remain indoors during the morning, this signal is incredibly weak. The brain remains in a state of twilight, never fully shutting off melatonin production. For a demographic that already struggles heavily with age-related sleep fragmentation and insomnia, this is catastrophic. By depriving your eyes of morning sunlight, you are guaranteeing that your sleep architecture will be compromised that night. Poor sleep prevents the glymphatic system from washing metabolic waste out of the brain, directly accelerating cognitive decline, memory loss, and the onset of neurodegenerative diseases. As the endocrine system struggles with artificial stress and lack of light, the third habit inflicts a profound insult upon your cardiovascular and metabolic systems: the immediate consumption of coffee prior to systemic rehydration. While you sleep, You lose a significant volume of water through respiration and subtle perspiration. You wake up in a state of clinical mild dehydration. In your 50s, the osmoreceptors in your brain lose their sensitivity. You may not feel thirsty, but your blood plasma volume is significantly reduced, meaning your blood is physically thicker and more viscous. This increased viscosity forces your heart to pump with much greater force to push the blood through your vascular network. When the first liquid you consume is coffee, you are introducing a mild diuretic and a powerful stimulant into a desiccated environment. The caffeine constricts the blood vessels while demanding a higher cardiac output, placing unnecessary mechanical stress on your aging endothelial lining. You must realize that your organs, your fascia, and your cellular matrices cannot function without immediate water. Flushing the system with 20 ounces of room temperature water, ideally with a pinch of sea salt, is the absolute biological prerequisite, effectively restoring blood plasma volume and safely lubricating the cardiovascular system before any caffeine is introduced. The physiological trauma of the morning is then sealed by the fourth and arguably most destructive habit, the high glycemic breakfast. For decades, marketing has convinced the public that a healthy breakfast consists of fruit juices, oatmeals, toast, or cereals. For a 50-year-old metabolism, this is a biochemical disaster. As we age, we naturally lose skeletal muscle mass, a condition known as sarcopenia. Because skeletal muscle is the primary storage site for circulating glucose, older adults simply have less physical space to store carbohydrates. Furthermore, decades of dietary habits often leave the 50-year-old body with a degree of underlying insulin resistance. When you consume a bowl of cereal or a glass of orange juice, you are flooding your gastrointestinal tract with rapidly digesting carbohydrates. This causes an immediate vertical spike in blood glucose. The aging pancreas, forced into an emergency response, pumps out a massive wave of insulin to force this sugar out of the toxic bloodstream. Because the muscles are already insulin resistant, the liver is forced to convert this sugar directly into triglycerides, aggressively promoting fatty liver disease and systemic inflammation. 2 hours later, the insulin overcorrection causes a severe hypoglycemic crash, leaving you exhausted, irritable, and craving more sugar. You have entirely locked your body out of its fat-burning pathways, ensuring that your energy levels will be erratic and dependent on constant feeding for the rest of the day. Finally, the fifth habit addresses the literal, structural mechanics of your body, the spine shock routine of violently throwing yourself out of bed and bypassing any form of morning mobility. The human spine is a masterpiece of biomechanics, heavily reliant on the intervertebral discs that act as shock absorbers between the vertebrae. These discs are hydrophilic, meaning they love water. While you are lying horizontally for 8 hours during sleep, gravity is removed from the spine, and these discs act like sponges, soaking up interstitial fluid and swelling to their maximum capacity. When you wake up, your spine is physically longer and much stiffer than it was the night before. The annulus fibrosus, the tough outer ring of the discs, naturally weakens and becomes more brittle after 50 years of life. When you immediately sit up rapidly, twist to get out of bed, or bend over to tie your shoes without allowing the spine to acclimate to gravity, you are placing immense hydrostatic pressure on these fully engorged discs. This sudden mechanical loading is the primary mechanism for disc herniations. This leads to sciatica and acute lower back spasms in older adults. Furthermore, during sleep, your lymphatic system, the network responsible for clearing cellular waste and immune byproducts, stagnates. Unlike the cardiovascular system, which has the heart as a pump, the lymphatic system relies entirely on muscular contraction to move fluid. By skipping a gentle 5-minute morning mobility routine consisting of controlled movements, you allow this inflammatory fluid to remain pooled in your joints. This is what creates the agonizing morning stiffness that plagues so many people over 50. To override this cycle of systemic sabotage, one must adopt a morning protocol grounded in clinical physiology. When you open your eyes, the smartphone must remain untouched. You must transition from sleep to wakefulness, allowing the natural cortisol curve to establish itself without digital panic. Before any other substance enters your body, you must rehydrate the vascular system with a substantial volume of mineralized water to restore blood viscosity. Within the first 30 minutes, you must expose your retinas to natural outdoor sunlight, definitively shutting off melatonin production, calibrating the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and ensuring that 12 hours later, your brain will be biologically primed for deep, restorative sleep. Mechanically, you must rise from the bed by rolling gently onto your side, using your arms to push your torso upright. This prevents any rapid flexion of the engorged, vulnerable lumbar discs. This must be followed by a few minutes of deliberate joint mobilization to engage the muscular pumps, forcing the stagnant, inflammatory lymphatic fluid out of the synovial cavities. Finally, the metabolic trajectory of the day must be secured by completely abandoning the high-carbohydrate breakfast paradigm. The first meal must consist entirely of high-quality proteins and healthy fats, such as eggs, avocados, or wild-caught fish. This protein-forward approach requires virtually zero insulin response, preventing the destructive glycemic roller coaster. Supplying the aging brain with the sustained neurochemical precursors it requires for focus, and keeping the body firmly locked in a state of fat oxidation. By systematically replacing these 5 destructive habits with biologically aligned protocols, an individual over 50 fundamentally alters the speed at which their cells age. You are no longer subjecting your endocrine, metabolic, and skeletal systems to a daily barrage of artificial trauma. Instead, you are providing the exact physiological inputs required to maintain functional independence, cognitive clarity, and physical resilience.